Welcome to the Million Pound Mission Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Shibley, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and I'm on a 1 million pound mission. Now, I've personally lost over 100 pounds, and I've applied what I've learned from my own transformation journey to help my hometown clients lose over 35,000 pounds in just 5 years. Now I'm on a mission to produce over 1 million pounds of results by delivering my best weekly tips, motivation, inspirational stories, and transformation strategies so that you can gain clarity about what you need to do to reach your goals and give you the confidence to take action. And the perfect time to start taking action is right now. So let's do this. All right, my friends, how's it going out there in podcast land? It's your buddy Adam, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, with episode number 70 of the Million Pound Mission Podcast. In this one, we're talking about how tiny leaps can lead to big changes with my main man, Gregg Clunis. You're going to love this episode, but you know what we got to do first. I've got to give somebody a shout out and make them podcast famous with our iTunes review of the week. This week, it's coming in from B-Town Brit. And here's what B-Town Brit has to say. After 2 kids, I was about to give up on being able to lose weight again. Adam changed all that and has given the info to help me feel in control of my exercise and nutrition. I love that the podcasts are focused on the most important body part, your brain. B-Town Brit, thank you so much for supporting the show, and I'm glad to make you podcast famous. Now, speaking of supporting the show, each week I've got a new way that you can support the show and support the Million Pound Mission. We're all in this together, after all. And this week I want you to check out our sponsor at www.trybouttime.com. Trybouttime.com is the place where I go to get my whey protein powder and many other supplement choices. And it's about time that the labels on our supplements and our protein powders are easy to read, easy to understand, and are with natural ingredients. All right? Isn't it about time that you can look at your protein powder and know what is in that, which is going inside your body? All right, so I want you to check it out. Trybouttime.com. My favorite with their whey protein is the Mocha Mint. It is delicious and nutritious. You want to check that one out for sure. When you go to the website, trybouttime.com, make sure that you use the promo code Transformation Coach. That's all lowercase, all connected. Transformation Coach. That's going to save you 25% off your order. So enjoy and check out trybouttime.com. Now that I've asked you to do something for me, I want you to get something for free. And it's time for the PhD to give it up for free. Here we go. The DefeatTheCheat.com Facebook group. This is one of my go-to tools this time of the year because we're surrounded, right? It's the holiday season, the time that I'm recording this, and there's holiday parties and cookies and cakes and festivities, and that's all good, but it can overwhelm you, and people can just really get sucked down that drain, that black hole of fitness doom, where we say, screw it, I'm going to just start again here in a couple weeks in January. And a lot of times they don't even do that. So check out my free Facebook support group. DefeatTheCheat.com is where you go to get that. Jump on in. It's a very supportive, high-energy group. We do challenges. We do daily posts. I do live Q&A. It's the place to be this time of year to get that accountability and that support. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we've got going on this week with this episode. So first I want you to think about, have you ever set a huge goal that you were totally fired up about until you actually realize just how big that goal was and you start to get in your head about it? It doesn't even really have to be a big goal. We get in our own heads about the goals that we set. All right, we all do this, and it kind of sucks because, so many times we end up talking ourselves into quitting before we even get started, before we build any momentum at all. Well, my friends, this week, things are about to change because my friend Gregg Clunis is coming onto the show to talk to you about how making tiny leaps can lead to those big changes that we are after. Now, Gregg is the host of the Tiny Leaps Big Changes podcast. I want you guys to check it out. All right. This is where he talks about the day-to-day behaviors that we all engage in that determine the results we gain in our lives. So in this episode, Gregg and I have a great conversation. We talk about what inspired him to create the Tiny Leaps Big Changes podcast. We talk about the tiny leap that has resulted in a big change for him personally. And then, I think this is going to be your favorite part, we talk about his top tiny leap suggestions to help you start building momentum in 4 key areas of life: in your health, your finances, your stress management, and productivity. So, as we're getting ready to launch that brand new year, this is the perfect time to start building up our momentum with some tiny leaps. So without further ado, here's my interview with Gregg Clunis. All right, my friends, it's your buddy, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and I am here with my friend Gregg Clunis of the Tiny Leaps Big Changes podcast. It's one of my favorite new podcasts that I've been checking out. I want you guys to check it out too. And Gregg is going to come on the show today and teach us about how these tiny leaps can lead to big changes. So, Gregg, welcome to the Million Pound Mission podcast, my friend.
Dude, I am so humbled to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for sharing your audience with me and giving me the opportunity to share, knowledge, experience. I don't know. My whole thing is that I'm not an expert in anything that I do. So I'm really just here to chat and share what I do know, and hopefully it'll help somebody.
Oh, I think you are going to bring plenty of knowledge. We're going to drop some knowledge bombs here today, bud. And I know as a fellow podcaster, we all kind of have that story or that thing that motivated us to launch a podcast, to get our message out there. So what does that look like for you with the Tiny Leaps Big Changes podcast? How did you get motivated? What's the backstory there?
Yeah, it's kind of, as I'm sure, similar for most people, sort of like a stop and start. So I first got into podcasting about 4 years ago. I had graduated college. I was working a full-time job in marketing here in New York City, and it was all right, but I was bored out of my mind. Let's put it that way. So I'm sitting at this desk, really just not happy with where I am. And so I start looking at podcasts around entrepreneurship and marketing and that sort of thing. And I stumbled on this show, got into it. He had a course around podcasting, so I signed up and have been hooked ever since. Fast forward a couple years, so I launched a few different shows. The first one wasn't great. The second one I loved, but ended after a season, and have just sort of been working with clients. 2015, December 2015, I read this book, and I won't say the title out of respect for the author because it's a good friend of mine, but it pissed me off, and I hope I can say that. It really, really just killed me to read. It was in the personal development space, and the whole thesis was that if you find what you love, your life will be perfect, and you'll wake up excited every day, and everybody will be amazing. And that's just not true. There's just no truth or practicality behind that. And so it crossed my mind in that moment. The personal development space has turned into this fluffy thing of just garbage where people just want to say things that are quotable instead of actually providing real practical advice that can help somebody actually make progress. So that day I decided I was going to start a show that focused exclusively on what you can do next Tuesday, what you can do right now, what you can do on any given day to make some kind of progress towards your big thing. And thus Tiny Leaps Big Changes was born. About 8 days later, we launched, decided to go daily, and it's just been killing it ever since.
Yeah, I love what you said there, because I've been through a round or two of personal development books and courses and things, and sometimes I hear, some of these world famous speakers, and I'm like, I feel kind of fired up and I feel kind of inspired. What the hell did I learn? I'm not sure what to do with this now.
Exactly.
So I feel you. I feel you on that, definitely.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit more about the concept of making a tiny leap. So I love the idea of it because, with our show, we focus on health and weight loss and getting healthy. And I think that sometimes people feel like they need to lose 100 pounds and they want to lose it all right now.
And then they have to realize, well, I didn't put this all on in one day, so I can't take it all off in one day. So how would you kind of define what a tiny leap is?
A tiny leap in my mind is the next thing you can do. So one of the things I talk about on my show, and I know this show is very specific to weight loss, but on my show, I tend to branch out things into what I call sort of the 6 core areas of your life. So you've got your fitness, your nutrition, your relationships, your finances, your career, and your emotional health. And what I've found is that in each of those areas, whatever your goal is, whatever your thing is, there's always a next step that you can take, even if it's not the big thing, even if if it doesn't seem huge, there's always a next thing, an opportunity right in front of you. And so around the career side, I've started talking, instead of chasing your passions, about looking at what opportunities are there and using those to sort of flip into the next thing. Around fitness, instead of setting this huge goal that is 5 years out, but you want to do it in a year, and being go-getter, like the thing that everybody pushes. As we talked about in a recent episode with my cousin, who's a fitness trainer and a sports trainer, just start walking if you've never really done fitness. Like, that doesn't seem like it's going to accomplish much, but 2 things happen. One, the small thing you do does matter. It builds up over time. But then 2, and this is almost more important, the process of doing anything allows you to start doing more things. And that's what I think people forget is life is really about momentum, and accomplishing the things you want is about building momentum. Just like in physics, there's this idea that it's harder to move something that has been stable, that hasn't been moved. And it's because of friction. And once it's moving, once you're rolling that boulder, it's much easier to keep it moving because the friction pushing it down and holding it in that spot is far less. And the same thing applies, I've found, to every area of life. It's much harder to start anything and to take that first step than it is to keep going. And so when you take a small step, the next opportunity, the thing that's right in front of you that doesn't seem like it's going to do anything, all of a sudden you are the kind of person that does X. So if you want to start going to the gym, and the first thing you do is go in and just stand in the weight room. Like, you don't even lift weights. You just show up and you stand in the weight room on your first day. All of a sudden, you're the type of person that goes into the gym. And that identity makes it much easier to go back the next day and actually pick up a dumbbell, or the next day and get on the yoga mat, or whatever your thing is.
Yeah. I heard another podcaster talk about a client. He's in the fitness space. And he talked about, he just challenged his client to stand on the treadmill and drink their morning coffee. And that was the goal for the whole first week. Just stand on the treadmill, drink their morning coffee. Next week, turn it on and just walk for 5 minutes. And it was just an easy transition. And that's exactly what you mentioned there. Now, the more episodes of your show that I listen to, it just always reminds me of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quote about, you don't have to see the entire staircase, you just have to take the first step. And I think what you said with momentum, it's critical. And that really comes across in your show. Now, I wanted to...
Well, real quick, before we pivot, I want to make sure I say this as well, because it's important. You don't have to see the entire staircase, you just have to take the next step. But the practical side of that is, as you're taking those steps, once you take the first step and you continue to go, you need to be constantly evaluating whether or not this is the right staircase.
Yes.
Because the cute thing in personal development is to say, those types of quotes that you just have to take the next step, just go and build a parachute on the way down, like those types of things. But if you're not constantly evaluating, if you're not tracking, if you're not paying attention and being conscious, all of a sudden you find yourself climbing a staircase that never ends, or at the top of something you didn't want to be at, or just chasing the wrong goal.
And that's just time wasted, energy wasted, money wasted, and we don't want to do that. So that's great advice. Great advice. Now, I wanted to ask you, now that I've become an official fan of your show, and
much appreciated.
Is there a name for your fans, like the Leapsters or something like that, or do we need to create?
I've been trying to think of one for 2.5 years. I don't have anything.
I'm pretty good at that sort of thing, so I may pop into like your Facebook page with some sort of creative name. I'll work on it. I'll put some time.
Please do.
Now, I wanted to maybe the leap of maniacs. I don't know. I'll work on it. So I wanted to see what tiny leap has created the biggest change for you personally. What do you think? Just that one little step that you made that's had the most impact on your life.
Right. Any particular area of my life?
Just anything that you can think of. So I'm going to grill you on some different topic areas here in a minute, but just anything that comes to mind, like that made a big difference for me.
Yeah. So I would say it seemed so random. So back in college, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was the guy that, to sound like I'm ripping off of Gary Vee, but I swear it's real. I was the guy that in elementary school, I was selling my older brother's pencils to classmates that didn't have them on test day.
Yes,
And then taking that money and buying up ice cream in the cafeteria and then flipping them at a profit. Like I was that kid. Growing up, though, I was also really good at school and lived by parents' expectations and all of those things. And I remember in college, I watched this movie, Social Network, that inspired like the startup generation, decided I was going to build a tech company and knew absolutely nothing about websites or how tech worked, like nothing. But I locked myself in a bedroom and taught myself like HTML and CSS and like bare basics of how to build and get a site up over the course of a weekend so that I could better communicate with the person I was going to eventually bring on to actually build it. Because going through it, I realized this is not going to build the thing I want, but at the very least, I could understand like the architecture behind it. And it seemed like just this random decision out of necessity. Since then, teaching myself web design, like teaching myself coding and getting an understanding of how the web worked and how web architecture worked has directly contributed to career opportunities, has directly allowed me to monetize other ideas because I can quickly execute on it, and has returned ridiculous amounts of money on the time investment that it took. But it's just this tiny little decision that I didn't want to be a web designer. I didn't have any goals to pursue tech necessarily. I just wanted to build something that I had in mind. And over the last 7 years, it's paid off dramatically.
That's awesome. What role do you think just human intuition plays in all these tiny leaps? Do you feel like, I think that's just a great example. If you're not sure exactly where it's going, but you just kind of felt it and that was the right thing to do. I mean, do you see a lot of that when you work with people on the tiny leaps concept? Is a lot of just kind of human intuition sometimes?
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is, so there's this great Steve Jobs quote. It's like, you can never see how the dots connect looking forward. You can only tell when you're looking back or something like that. And that idea holds true, I think. But what I think it really comes down to is less about intuition of somehow perceiving the correct path and more about on a day-to-day basis, you can only make decisions with the tools you have. So as you acquire more tools, you have more decisions available to you. So I developed web design as a skill set. And since then, I've consciously chosen to use it. Like I reached out to web design roles. I built a portfolio. I did client work. Like I made those decisions each and every single day using the tools at my disposal. So it's not so much like, oh, I had the intuition to know this would pay off, or I divined the right path to make.
Right.
I've just been building the path as I've been going.
I mean, it didn't come to you during a meditation session? You didn't have a vision of like somebody in the desert bringing you this knowledge?
Man, I've been waiting for that. Like, I think things would be so much easier if that would just happen already.
Yeah, I think it was like Jim Morrison appears to you in the desert or something and delivers the knowledge. So. It's awesome.
I mean, if he had, because one of my biggest regrets, around the same time when I was like involved in this world, I also got super just interested in hacker culture in general and learned about like the Silk Road, which for those of you listening who've never heard of, was this crazy website on the dark web that you couldn't get access to, but it sold some really insane stuff. And around that time, the founder of that got busted and Bitcoin became a thing that was a part of public language, but it was worth like $3 at the time. And I remember having a conversation with my friend saying, oh yeah, I want to see what Bitcoin is and buy one. And I just never did. Man. And now we're here. So if Jim Morris had showed up, maybe I would have made a better decision.
It's Jim's fault. All right. So I wanted to kind of give you a little rapid fire, not really questions, but I just want to get some rapid fire tiny leap suggestions is what I'm going to call this.
Sure.
So maybe just the first tiny leap that comes to your mind, or an example that you've heard from someone else that's helped them improve in these different categories. So let's start off with health. This is a health and fitness show. So what's a health tiny leap that you see out there working for people right now?
Biggest thing I've noticed for myself and for people around me is just experimenting. So maybe it doesn't seem that tiny, but I spend a lot of time trying out different nutrition plans and exercise routines. And part of it is so that it can stay fresh and exciting and interesting to me, which makes it more fun to stay a part of. But the other part is so much of, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but so much of losing weight and getting in shape and all of those things comes down to finding a lifestyle that works for you more so than a short-term diet. And I find that you can only find those things by being open to experimentation and sort of constant just testing. So if we want to break that down to a very small thing you can do, just start writing down what you're eating on a day-to-day basis. And you don't have to worry about changing the first couple of days. Just write it down honestly. And just by seeing it written out, you'll start to recognize areas that could be improved.
Love it. I know my audience right now is going, oh, Adam found a new friend. Because this is how I talk all the time. And I love how you said testing, because I talk about the transformation. I use a term called the transformation toolbox. And I'm not one of those people that's like, I do CrossFit. That's all that ever works. You should all do CrossFit too. Or I do paleo. That's all that ever works. And I'm like, let's use the best tool for the job. And sometimes the tool that you need is paleo. Sometimes it's high carb, sometimes it's low carb, sometimes, whatever, it's keto or whatever, the right tool is. Yeah. That's what we use. We don't say this is the be all end all. It's let's learn, let's see what's the best for us. That's what works for our lifestyle, but also what works for our lifestyle right now. So
absolutely. Yes. Now I would push it even further, and I might get laughed out of the room here, but sometimes the most important tool for the job might be the least effective from like a fitness and nutrition point of view, but it's the one that person will stick with the longest.
Exactly. Yes, Greg. Oh man, this is great. I love it when people reinforce the things that I've already said on the show. That's awesome. All right. So we're off to a great start, my friend. So next tiny leap suggestion. What about people that are dealing with tons of stress or disorganization? People are just kind of running amok out there and need to get it together. What kind of tiny leap suggestion would you give to that person?
So this one's interesting because I find that, like everything else, it's pretty unique to the person. For me, I get a lot out of when I'm like really, really in it and stressed out and just can't focus. Writing is like free association writing, just opening a journal with a pencil because I hate pens, and just writing everything out helps dramatically. And that allows you to get a little bit of perspective as well. I know people that swear on meditation, swear on transcendental meditation specifically. I know people that when they're really stressed out, like they just need a cup of tea. So I would say, like, if we're looking for something a little bit global, I guess, perspective really does wonders for you. If you can find a way to put your stress and the things that are bugging you into some kind of context that allows it to stop being overwhelming, that's the best thing possible. And that might mean taking 5 minutes away from kids, away from family, whatever it is, or it might mean journaling for 35 minutes. Whatever it is for you, you've got to be able to put it into perspective. That's the end goal.
Right. No, that makes sense. I love it. All right. Next rapid fire tiny leap suggestion: financial. Somebody's in financial trouble. You can make that whatever you want. It could be debt. It could be they don't know what they're doing with their finances. It could be taxes. What's a financial tiny leap that sticks out for you?
This one's personal to me. It's something. So finances is probably the area of my life I spend the most attention on. For context, I graduated college in 2014. I've got like $103,000 in debt. So it's pretty important to me to get this part right. And the number one thing that works for me is logging into my bank account every single morning without fail. And why that works is part of the problem people run into when it comes to finances is just not being conscious of what's happening. They don't know where their money's actually going. And so when they need it, it's not there because money will find a way to run away from you. So I log in every single morning. It tells me how much is in my account. Once a week, I check. I just go into the bank account. I use Chase. They have the ability to filter by dates, and I just check what's going to come out in that upcoming week, and all of that's accounted for, and I'm good to go. So I don't track spending. I don't do any of that stuff as much as some other people might. But just logging in and knowing how much is in my account every single morning really drives my decisions throughout the day.
That's super interesting. I recently had an interview with an author, Mike Michalowicz, and he's written a couple of books. He wrote a book called Profit First, one called The Pumpkin Plan, and he talks
that's so
about...
funny. This is like the fifth time Profit First has been mentioned to me in the last week.
Yeah. If you never had him on the show, you need to. He's a great interview. He's a really, really good guy. But he talks about eating from smaller plates, and if your debt plate, your basically your operating expense plate, I should say, if that's smaller, then you're going to spend less. If it's bigger, you're going to spend more. And it's just like when you eat off a larger plate. So I think it's a similar concept there. So that's really good. Last one.
Yeah.
Last one.
So
go ahead.
Could I comment on that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
And obviously I haven't read the book. I don't know him. But what I found with that view and Dave Ramsey and all of these sort of things, what it ends up being about more so than the strategy is about going to an extreme. Because by going to an extreme, you're able to shift your habits and that forces you into a new habit pattern. And so that works. Like it works really well. I found that for me, like I just don't want to. And so that's why I like Dave Ramsey's approach to with the debt snowball. Like I'm just not a fan of it. And so instead of going to the extreme, I focus on changing my habits day by day.
Yeah, it makes sense. 100% makes sense. All right. Last one, tiny leap suggestion on productivity. Somebody that's just not getting it done, feel like they're kind of getting behind on life in general. What's just a beginning step to become more productive?
Two things. So the first I've been doing for a while, the second I just adopted 2 weeks ago, and it's done wonders. So the first is put everything on a calendar. For me, it just works. Having it on a calendar, having the alert come in, it's more likely to get done. It's not guaranteed, but it's more likely. And it also, so I read this book a while back called 2 Awesome Hours. It's by an NYU neurologist. And the idea is that if you can eliminate the choice in between tasks, so that half a second where you're like, what should I work on next? You can eliminate that, your productivity goes through the roof. And so I block in my calendar with no breaks in between. I take the time in the morning to decide ahead of time, like this is what I'm going to work on. The second thing that I recently adopted from my friend Matt Cohn, who runs this agency called Different Hunger, is to assign dollar values to each task. So I put everything into, and even if this isn't business related, if you're not trying to start a company, you can still apply a value to the task that you're doing. So things that move you closer towards what we call leverage. And leverage is defined as creating more time or enabling you to make more money, because money allows you to buy time, and time is ultimately the most important piece. So if you can apply a dollar value based on how close it is to getting you more time to the tasks that you're doing, all of a sudden you start to realize at the end of the day, hey, I only put in $250 worth of value today because I worked on $10 tasks when I could have worked on $1,000 task and put in $1,000 worth of value. And so by putting that dollar value on a task and forcing yourself to apply it to your day-to-day life and what you're working on, and check it at the end of the day as far as how much value you've created, it really forces you into this mindset of choosing to work on more tasks that are higher value. And because they're higher value, they're going to get you more time, they're going to get you more money, and they're going to get you more leverage overall. And when you combine those two, so applying dollar values to everything that you've plot it out on your calendar, or applying dollar values to everything on your to-do list and then only plotting the stuff that's $250 or more, let's say. All of a sudden you're in this realm of like just extreme productivity on the right tasks.
Yeah, that's that's huge. And I think just that change of perspective, like even for people, like you said, that aren't maybe starting up a business or running their own business, think about what has high value for you for your time. Like, is it time with your spouse or your kids? And you can say, are the tasks that I'm doing right now, is that worth not being with them? What's the trade out there? What's the trade out value? So I love that concept, man. That's an awesome one. That's probably my favorite Tiny Leap suggestion of them all so far. So we're building momentum here. Now, I know I want to be respectful of your time. I got one or two more questions for you. But first, I want to make sure we cover how people can connect with you and how they can get involved with the Tiny Leaps Big Changes podcast, how they can follow you and subscribe to that, and then any other way they can get connected with you.
Sure thing. So easiest thing, you guys are already listening to a podcast. Just go over to your search bar, type in Tiny Leaps Big Changes, and give my show a shot. You don't have to love it, but at least give it a try, and then let me know what you think. If you hate it, find me on Twitter and say, hey, this show was terrible, I hate you. And if you love it, then find me on Twitter and tell me, because I like hearing good things. And in addition to that, if you want to, something I put together recently, I noticed that every year around this time, people set their resolutions, they set their goals for next year, and then by like May, they forget them. And part of the problem there is just the process people take to setting goals, and then more importantly, the process they take to achieving them and what they're doing after they've set them. So I put together a quick guide that just helps you walk through the process of utilizing the SMART goal framework to set better goals. And then from there, how do we audit our day-to-day behavior? How do we change that day-to-day behavior so that we're constantly making progress and tiny leaps towards those goals? So if you want that, just head over to tinyleaps.today or listen to the podcast first, because I mention it in pretty much every episode.
Yeah, and I'll get that linked up in the show notes and in my blog. So we'll definitely make sure that everybody knows about that. And any of the posts that I put out on Instagram or Facebook will have that link as well. I want you guys to check that out for sure, because as we wrap out, we're recording this at the end of 2017. This is the perfect time to start lining up those goals and get a little bit of momentum and just get that vision going, so you can start making those steps, those initial steps, those tiny leaps to build into 2018. So I definitely want you guys to check that out. Now, last question for you, Gregg. If there is one ask of my audience that you'd want to put out there, what would it be?
Whatever your fitness goals are, whatever your weight loss goals are, I would challenge you, and this is gonna alienate a lot of people, and I apologize ahead of time, but it needs to be said. I would challenge you going into 2018, or if you're listening to this in 2018, do not approach this year as the year that you accomplish that goal. And what I mean by that is approach the year as the year that you focus on showing up every day, making changes to your behavior, and developing habits that will last the rest of your life, instead of approaching it as I'm going to run and gun and accomplish this goal by June and be amazing. Like, don't approach it that way, because you will burn out, most likely. You will not end up accomplishing it. Or if you do, you'll end up sliding backwards. So don't approach it as the year you're going to accomplish the goal. Instead, try to shift the way you think about it, try to shift your perception, and approach it as the year that you decide to build day-to-day habits that will help you accomplish that goal and keep it for the rest of your life.
Gregg, that was awesome, man. This is going to be the year that we show up, people. That's what we're going after, right? And Gregg, I just want to give you a shout out and then thank you for making some time for us, because this has been awesome. And I just appreciate you and what you do with the show, because I feel like you give people hope. And just what you just said was a great example. People get so caught up in these giant goals, and then, they're just numbers that we put out there with no real science or perspective behind them. It's like, oh, I'm going to lose 50 pounds this year, and if I don't, then I suck. And if I don't do it by June, then I really suck. And I feel like you are getting people, you're kind of, smacking us across the head with that frying pan of knowledge and saying, hey, let's back it up a little bit and let's just start taking the first step. Let's start with the first step before we totally intimidate ourselves into not even getting started at all. So I appreciate 100%. What you're doing. Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing.
And by the way, I'm the biggest offender here. Like, I set ridiculous goals for myself and beat myself up when I don't get them. And that's why, like, everything I talk about is just me shifting my own approach to things, realizing, well, this is how I should have been thinking about it, and then desperately trying to warn everybody else not to do that.
And that's another great thing about your show, and that's another reason why people should give it a shot, is that, like you said in the very beginning, you're not positioning yourself as this guru expert person. You're in the experiment. You are out there living it on the front lines and saying, hey, here's where I kind of messed this up. You guys shouldn't do that. And hopefully that'll save you some time, money, energy, and effort. And you can, come out of it a little bit better and shorten the learning curve compared to what I did. So, I just appreciate that. And I think you've got a good thing going. I'm excited to keep supporting the show and tuning in. And we're just grateful for your time here today.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, guys. As always, at the end of the show, I'm going to challenge you. I want you to think in the next 24 hours. This applies especially to this interview. In the next 24 hours, what is a tiny leap that you can make? What's a tiny step to get some momentum going off of what you learned? Maybe it's off of one of the rapid fire tiny leaps that we talked about. Maybe something else popped into your mind as far as the goal setting for 2018, or maybe you download Gregg's goal setting form and something pops up in your mind there. But in the next 24 hours, I want you to think about a way that you can take action. And as always, you know what's coming. I'm going to challenge you to get out there and own it every meal, every workout, every day. And I will see you on the next episode. One last thing before I let you go today. So many of you have been contacting me about taking action. Where's the best place to start? What program should I be on? So I went into the Transformation Lab and I created something new. It's my Transformed Academy, and registration is officially and finally open. All right, I'm loading up all of my best workout protocols, all the follow-along workouts that you love, and developing more every month. I'm loading up all my best nutrition programs of all types. As I talk about, you need the right tool for the job, whether that's paleo, low carb, high carb, carb cycling, clean eating, keto, whatever. You've got the right tool, and we're going to teach you how to use that tool. Then we also have accountability groups, coaching calls with me, and so much more. The best part is the information never gets stale because I add new programs every 90 days. And the even better part, you're going to freak out when you see the price. Head on over to www.transformationcoach.me and check out the Transformed Academy.